everyone, and welcome to the Jeff Bullish Show. Today I have with me Hikari Senju. Now, Hikari, just a little bit about Hikari before we have a fireside chat. Hikari is a computer science graduate from Harvard University with a passion for technology and design. He founded his first startup, QuickHelp, an on-demand tutoring app, which he later sold to YUPcom and became their head of growth. During his time at YUPcom, Senju observed inefficiencies in content spending and the potential of AI in advertising. And as we start to realize now, AI is starting to appear everywhere in conversations as well as in products and services and what we do, and also in our creative lives. And this inspired him to establish Omneky in 2018. Senju's background in computer science, entrepreneurship, and his experience with AI technology led him to create Omneky, an AI platform that generates, analyzes, and optimizes personalized ad creatives at scale. Hikari, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here, dialing in from San Francisco.
Thank you, Jeff. Excited to be here and excited for our conversation.
So, Hikari, you ended up doing a computer science degree at Harvard University, which is one of the elite universities in the world. So, what led to that? In other words, not only the inspiration maybe to do computer science, but where did this all start, this interest in science and computing?
Sure, absolutely. So, I'm actually the first generation to go to an Ivy League from my family. I grew up in Westchester in New York. My dad's a painter, and my grandfather worked at IBM. And so, I kind of grew up in, but an immigrant family, a first generation immigrant family. And so, grew up in this intersection of kind of that immigrant mindset hustle, but also technology. Like early access computers as a kid, I would compete in robotics competitions, and also I had a deep. I really like painting because spend the weekends at my dad's art studio and paint alongside him. And so I was a creative. I like creating things, painting things, like making things. And so I was very lucky to get into Harvard. And obviously studied very hard and did a lot of the won national awards and things like this, and accomplished stuff that helped me get into, helped me. I think I was one of two kids from my high school to get into Harvard that year, and with a focus on computer science. And it was at Harvard, and I'd also actually gone to MIT, and so it was actually I was cross-registered at MIT taking AI courses there when I saw the early generative AI models, kind of a precursor to the generative adversarial networks. And that got me very excited about Gen AI because I saw AI generating paintings, generative art, some of the very early precursors to generative art. And it was about a decade ago, and being the son of an artist, being passionate about technology, and also kind of having an intuition of Moore's law to some extent, of because having just grown up around it, you kind of develop an intuition of going at the exponential rate in which technology improves. Felt that this technology was advancing very quickly, and that it would probably surpass human abilities within a couple of years. And so, or within that decade was kind of my sense. And so I was kind of playing around with it, very excited. And that's actually how I got hooked into generative AI was through generative art. And that's partly due to my upbringing in New York.
Right. So, really, you had a creative bent initially rather than a scientific bent. You saw you saw the intersection of AI and creativity and art. That was the motivator?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was AI had always been viewed as something that wasn't creative, that robots will never be creative. But what this was showing was that AI can actually be very creative, and that was I think it was very contrarian at that time. That the view was that we'd all become artists, and then the AI will do the non-artistic work, and humans will just automate everything but being artists essentially. But it seems like in some ways the reverse is happening, in which case AI is actually becoming the artist, and so that was, I think, the very interesting, kind of surprising thing that I realized in college, and got me very excited about the space. And so around that time, I started playing around with open source models. I mean, you have some big open source companies founded around that time, or a couple of years later, and and so a lot of this technology started becoming available to regular developers and people who are just passionate about technology. You can download these embeddings from online and train them yourself, and so that was, yeah, my passion from Gen AI comes from that.
So, what year was that? Because essentially, public consciousness of AI generated art has really only appeared since ChatGPT in a large sense. In other words, AI got given a friendly face called ChatGPT, which is the chat bots. And so, what year was this that you went to Stanford because this interest in the intersection of AI and creativity and art?
Yeah, so I was at Harvard from 2011 to 2015.
Right.
And so the classes I was taking in machine learning, 2014, 2015 at Harvard and particularly at MIT, was where I saw some of the early generative artwork. And at that time, it was kind of hallucinogenic. It was, it was very trippy. It was kind of, it was very pixelated, like, but I saw like the PhD student was like the TA of this class, literally entering a prompt, being like, I think the prompt was like elephant in the sky or elephant flying through the sky, and it would generate like, a smudge of gray, like a blue background, with like what appears to be wings, but like that was enough. That was enough. I was like, wow, like if you can do that in 10 years, and I think it's played out, it's going to be able to do anything. And I think now, that's kind of proven out to be true.
Yeah. So you're at Harvard, you're seeing AI start to develop and unfold in front of you, and you then went up and, I don't know, so with QuickHelp, which is an on-demand tutoring app, did you do that after you left Harvard?
I did that while I was a student at Harvard.
Right.
Um, and
What led to
you
that?
know, the yeah, I mean, partly I think I've always been entrepreneurial. I liked starting
Mhm.
projects and building things. As I said, I was growing up. I loved painting and I loved making things. I loved making websites. I mean, I think like, around when I was a teenager, I made a website to recommend clothing that used like an early precursor recommender network, recommender systems, where we would tag all the. I just scraped all the websites from Ralph Lauren, and I would tag it with AI, and then recommend similar clothes based on you kind of select an image. And so um so I'd always been passionate about making things. I'm a maker. I like making things. I grew up in a family of craftspeople to some extent. And so I always was making these projects. And one of the projects I made in college was this app to connect students with tutors. And the impetus behind that was, one of my roommates was doing something called dorm crew, which is when, students to make extra money, they kind of, do cleaning for the dorms. And a very smart person, very and like was kind of, I felt like a missed opportunity because this person could probably be making a lot more money tutoring. And at the same time, I had some friends that were also PhD students, and they're making minimum wage, less than minimum wage, sometimes even in their departments. And so really saw an efficiency in the market of this resource fundamentally being underutilized, and felt that an app that could be social and local and mobile. So it was a mobile app to connect students to tutors nearby or other students who could be tutors in you could see how many mutual friends you had with them, and so there was some element of trust, or you could see that you went to the same school, what school they went to, et cetera, to then meet on demand to help with tutoring. And so that was the impetus for starting. It was kind of a side project. And then became, I think I built it at a hackathon, maybe even at Berkeley, because I was also doing a lot of hackathons then. Um, you know, and yeah, and they kind of got a lot of users initially, and I was kind of shocked to see that there were a lot of users. Thought, okay, well, maybe this would be interesting, and then got into some incubator uh, in the summer, and so that was kind of my first company.
Right. And you sold that, okay, onto YUPcom. So I had a quick search on that, and I can't seem to see YUP.com still in existence. Are they still around?
Yeah, so Yup.com was acquired by another ed tech company.
I don't.
It was
Okay.
found,
Yeah.
yeah, Yeah, it was founded by 𝓦𝓱𝓪𝓻𝓷, who's a really great friend of mine now, and yeah, I mean, he started YUPcom essentially, to help with math tutoring at Stanford. I really liked him, and I'm a big fan of his. And he, said, "Hey, we're working on something similar. Do you want to work? Do you want to work together on this and join forces?" And we had a lot of tutors on our platform, and so that's kind of and that's kind of how we worked together after I sold my company to him, and I learned a lot. I learned a lot from Biggie. And it was very, like at that time, I had no idea how to run a company and how to manage and how to do many of the things I think an entrepreneur needs to be able to do. And I learned a lot, and it helped then set up for Omnikey. And also particularly, also seeing the particular problem that is when I was running marketing at YUP.com, I saw how many challenges there are in terms of running effective content. That advertising is essentially like $1 trillion industry, but half the budget, advertising budget, is misspent on suboptimal ads.
Yeah.
Even as recently as like a couple of years ago, and I think even still today. And so that's a lot of money. Half of the money being wasted is a lot of money being wasted. And so that, combined with my passion in generative art, kind of put the two together to be like, why don't we just rapidly generate A/B tests with AI, and then also use computer vision to quantify design, because it wasn't a really great tool for analytics of design at that time, and then kind of close the loop so that the AI can in real time get insights about what types of content's delivering clicks and delivering sales, and then generate new content based on that.
Cool. So, right. So that led you, I suppose, after doing that, into how can you create content efficiently and quickly using AI and technology? So when did Omnikey start? Is that how we pronounce it too, by the way? Is that correct?
It's Omnikey. Omnikey.
Omnikey. Okay. I was saying correctly pretty well. Very, very close. But anyway, so Omnikey, so you saw this problem that you went out to solve, and Omnikey, I think, started in about 2018. Is that correct?
It was started in 2018, yes.
Okay. So essentially, what have you done with it then? Because you can create the content. Then we're talking about, so how does AI come into the picture across Omnikey? So you want to create content for marketers to actually, one, create the content and then basically put it out onto platforms to actually use as advertising. So you're doing video, you're doing images, you're doing writing. So tell us a little bit about how a user would use Omnikey. In other words, right. Let's take us through the steps.
Absolutely. Customer signs up, they connect their brand assets and brand guidelines. Step number one. So the AI learns what is unique about that brand. What are the products? It fine tunes on the customer's product photos, on their language use, and on their visual aesthetic.
Yep.
Two, customers integrate their ad networks and ad platforms. So Meta, Google, LinkedIn, TikTok, Snap, et cetera, Reddit. And so we can get real-time data about what types of content is driving clicks and ultimately driving sales. Then we will, customers can sign up. They can see a dashboard with all the creative insights, predictive insights. So, we believe that an ad with this feature will drive 20% increase in lift, or 200% increase in click-through rates, or a certain percentage in increase in return on ad spend. The creative insights can be mirrored, because what an AI can tag now when it comes to creative is pretty broad. That you can tag language, the use of the language, grammatical structure, the persuasion tactics, the tone of voice, the elements of within the creative using computer vision, every individual element, the background color, the font, is it male or female, is the narrator, the voice, what is the action of the voice, etc. And so we turn every creative into like a very in-depth featureized set of elements, and we find correlations between those elements and, say, a particular objective metric. So again, click-through rates or return on ad spend. That actual product, that analytics product, actually was our first product we launched in 2018, because the generation at that time wasn't that great, but computer vision had advanced quite significantly by that point. And that was actually also the impetus of why I started the company in 2018, was that computer vision was pretty good. And so you can get insights about what types of creative content is driving results.
Yep.
So you can so customers can see all these insights, and then customers that we then generate creative briefs for the customer with suggested target audiences, suggested platforms, the like advertising platforms we suggest they should run more ads on or run ads on, concepts for creative imagery, templates as well. We generate and recommend templates, and then customers can then approve the creative brief, generate ads based on the creative brief, and then ultimately launch the ads across the various platforms.
Okay. So essentially, you're learning the customer. In other words, brand voice, brand images. So how does the model work? Is it subscription? Is it a project? Is it done for you service? A lot of questions there, but is it something they get a monthly subscription to? Do they do it themselves? Tell us a bit about that.
It's usage based. It's consumption based pricing. So the more you use the product, it's based on the number of creatives that you're generating, and the amount of products photos that you're fine tuning the models on, and so the more you use the product, the more you charge, and it's dynamic and flexible.
Right. So does the client actually do it themselves?
Yeah, the client can use, we have a free trial on our site today. You can sign up and start using the tool yourself today. There's also, if you want us to do additional services on top of that, there's that option as well. But it is a self-serve tool that customers can set up and use today.
Right. And what's your target market? Is it basically the small to medium business more than enterprise? What's your target ideal customer?
Yeah, I think our ideal customer is that SMB medium-sized business has kind of been our bread and butter for basically the lifetime of the company. We do have a couple of great enterprise customers, and definitely the forward-thinking and forward-leaning enterprise customers are trialing our product and using our product themselves. Some of the some of the major consumer brands are trialing our product, but there's a little bit more of a hesitancy when it comes to enterprise and the use of generative AI due to IP concerns or copyright concerns, data, things like this, and so they're a bit more exploratory. But yeah, most of the usage and revenue is coming from small and medium-sized business today for us.
All right, cool. So let's go back to the role of AI in the process. So AI can do a range of things, help you with the creating of the content, obviously. And then, of course, then it's trying to see the pattern in the noise of the analytics and what works and what doesn't. Are they the two major areas you're using AI for?
Yes, exactly. Those are the twin engines, insights and generations.
Yeah, okay. And are you seeing any trends in the marketplace in terms of platforms to use or types of media to use, such as, is video now a major digital advertising piece of content as opposed to still images? What's the general, are you seeing any trends emerging in terms of how people are advertising on digital platforms? And you're talking a lot about social media platforms, aren't you?
Yeah, so video has been a big focus for social media for, I would say, for some time. And so that continues to be a big medium for creating and launching content, advertising content. It's a very engaging form of content on social media. But also video applies to a whole area outside of social as well, which is streaming. And the rise of streaming platforms and ad-supported streaming platforms. Netflix invented the subscription streaming model, but really now the space is becoming increasingly more competitive with ads-driven streaming platform models. Like there's Disney is ad-supported streaming, and list goes on, Fubo, Tubi, etc. And so so you need video ads and video content for those platforms as well.
Right. So in terms of them, so basically AI to help you create the content, then AI to analyze the effectiveness of the advertising. So tell me how that works. And then I've got another question after that. It's about how your platform must start to become a bit sticky because it actually starts to learn about the customer. The customer then starts to rely on it. But that's the next question. So how is the AI analytics work on the platform, and and do you have any examples of great, I suppose, results from providing an uplift in, click-throughs or basically generating sales leads, whatever? Tell us about the
Sure,
analytics.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So we have, for example, um, a company called Omiana, which is a vegan, cruelty-free makeup brand, and for them, we delivered a 2x increase year-over-year sales. Phrases like cruelty-free, was correlated with driving predictive engagement. We have a customer called Thunder that we saw a 50% decrease in the cost per install. And this is a mobile app based out of Egypt that does gives Egyptian consumers access to the American markets. We've had a company called 𝓬𝓬, which is a consumer banking, it's a consumer savings account platform. It's like kind of gamify savings through their kind of weekly like random lottery-esque thing feature. And we deliver them a 50% decrease in cost per leads there through television ads as well. And so those are some examples of customers that have seen real results with utilizing our platform and tool.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's really based on really analyzing the individual characteristics of each creative and what's driving lift. And you can read more about it on our website, and we have a large list of case studies on our site.
Right. So the customer signs up, the machine learns about them, their advertising, their brand voice, and so on, and starts creating content. So sounds to me like it could be quite sticky. In other words, once you sort of go in there and teach it, because AI is helping you create the type of content that works for their brand. So, and then of course there's the building of assets and so on. So does that reduce a lot of churn? Like, do you have much churn on the platform in terms of people coming and going?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is like a virtuous cycle in the tool where you learning based on the performance, but also the customer is inputting their own information about the brand. And so core part, and like if this is really the third pillar of the product that isn't really a feature but kind of underpins everything, is brand management. And I think that in the future, brand management is going to become more important as competition for attention becomes fiercer. The brands that are trusted are going to elevate. And just be able to compete in the noise because they just exude more trust. And so as customers approve the ads and they edit the ads and they launch the ads, then our system learns what makes their brand unique, and that is work and investment information that they're investing into our tool, on top of all the real-time data we're getting from the various ad platforms.
Right.
And so, yeah, regarding the loyalty of our customers I think are pretty on par with the retention of businesses that sell to SMBs. And you can take a look at, for example, HubSpot's retention numbers for certain cohorts of customers, and I think it's very much in line with that. But we're always working on making it better.
Right. Cool. So in terms of the other thing a lot of people would be interested in is, okay, so how did you start it? Was it self-funded? Did you go and do approach VC companies and say, we've got a great idea, fund us? How did you actually fund Omnikey?
Yeah, so it's really interesting, right? I mean, I'm a solo founder. I raised 13 million in seed. It's but it was first 2 years was bootstrapped. I mean, nobody would. Ad tech has never really been particularly sexy, especially recently. And then AI you talk about AI in 2018, 2019, 2020, really anytime before ChatGPT gets launched, and everyone thought it was vaporware. So yeah, I mean, I think it was, I mean, I tried raising money for the first couple of years. I mean, we were very lucky. We had some really supportive angel investors early on, not enough to really be able to hire people that much, but Village Global, Richard Socher, the chief scientist at Salesforce, and others were some of the earliest believers in the company, and we're very lucky to be able to work with them on the very early stage of the company, just to keep the company alive.
Yep.
To then be in position when ChatGPT gets launched, when COVID was also another big impetus for our platform. GPT-3 gets launched. So I think 2020 in particular was like kind of a seminal moment for us because it combined several tailwinds, particularly COVID plus GPT-3 gets launched.
Yeah.
GPT-3 makes a lot of what we were doing more scalable because we were like individually fine-tuning weights on a customer basis.
Okay.
So it was not as scalable. And then COVID suddenly created a humongous demand for digital advertising or reimagining digital advertising. Many brick and mortar businesses suddenly realized they had to be online. A lot of big advertisers realized that they had to kind of rethink their digital strategy, and so that created a humongous. They say chaos is a ladder, and it created an opportunity for us to kind of start growing during that period. But if it wasn't for some of our early, truly angel investors, I mean, in the essence of being an angel, the first couple of years were very lean times. But also, I think it developed my chops as an entrepreneur to be super capital efficient and resource efficient, and stretch every dollar as far as you can take it, and so it was also good training for me as well.
Yep. So really, you basically had a good idea that maybe the timing wasn't perfect and was hard because AI wasn't in public consciousness really until ChatGPT launched at end of 2022. So you saw a big surge in interest in your service when in 2023 or shortly after ChatGPT launched?
Well, we started seeing a surge in our interest in 2020 when GPT-3, which was kind of the API version of ChatGPT, was launched. OpenAI launches GPT-3 in 2020, and so that was really that was really what made started the growth, and definitely since then every year has been a further acceleration of awareness of what we do, and so it's like the strategy from day one though, right? When I started the company in 2018 was, what is the winning strategy for riding the Gen AI wave, right? And the belief I had, and this is from me playing around with open source models from 2014, 2015, when I was a student at Harvard, was a lot of technology will continue to be open source because this is a technology that's driven largely by research institutions and open source communities, as well as private companies doing research in this kind of commons of research regarding content generation, because it's just interesting to so many types of players, and there's just something inherently interesting as a human, I think, regarding the process of content generation. And so I believe that content generation would keep getting better every year, regardless of whether we invested in it or not. And so then the question was, okay, assuming that Gen AI is going to keep getting better, this is the strategy from 2018. Well, what is necessary, right, to get this to be a product that scales? It's the last mile. It's building the ad integrations. It's building the great analytics engines. It's building the great enterprise workflows and workflows for advertisers. So they can harness this technology. And so from day one, what we did was we built a workflow tool for advertisers that we can slot in the latest Gen AI models as the technology improves. And we can be a great application for Gen AI for advertisers. And so that was a strategy from day one, was build the best workflow for advertisers in Gen AI, let the open source community continue to advance Gen AI in terms of the image or video or copy generation on their own, because they're going to keep doing that. And there's way more smarter people working on this than our small team of ragtag startup team. and for us, we're going to focus on the last mile. And that strategy has seemed to have worked out through since 2018, since we executed, is that every time there's an advancement, our product gets better, and we're the only really the ones that have built a complete workflow that integrates with the customer's data stack, that integrates with their creative team workflows and marketing team workflows, that delivers them the insights that they're seeking, and gives them the control that they need to really harness this technology.
Right. So in terms of what you use to basically drive your engine, is it ChatGPT-4 and other tools? What tools are you using? Because you are developing a niche product, which is more a vertical, okay, as opposed to general, which is ChatGPT-4 and the other different chatbots. So what other technology you're using to actually support your technology and feed your machine?
Yeah, so we're big fans of OpenAI um, we've been partnered with OpenAI from GPT the era the days when we were downloading GPT-2 embeddings from Hugging Face and fine tuning them on customer brand information
Yeah.
back in 2019. So we're close partners, and we're close partners with OpenAI since back when they were still like making video game simulations, and so we're big fans of their platform and the platform that they've developed. But also, we have to deliver the state of the art experience for customers. And so if that means a couple a couple years ago, starting working with Stable Diffusion and utilizing those models, or today, utilizing models like Flux and fine tuning those. And other models, Llama comes to mind when it comes to the open sourced on-prem go-to-market notion. And so it's we deliver. We're a mix of experts. We deliver the best results utilizing the state-of-the-art technology wherever we can find it, and delivering the state-of-the-art experience to our customers.
Yeah, using basically the best technology that's the foundations for you. Okay, so have you been surprised by the pace of change and the evolution of AI technology in the last 2 or 3 years since ChatGPT hit the streets?
No, no. I mean, it's interesting. You can literally look at like my business plan or like this deck I wrote back in 2020, and I said, within a year, AI is going to generate copy really well, and within a year or two, it's going to generate images really well.
Mm-hmm.
And it's played out exactly as I wrote in this, and you can see in my solid chicken scratch, and I've shared it with my management team, and they've, it's like it was pretty clear, at least for me, sitting from the perspective of, again, from 2018, 2019, going to the OpenAI office and having friends who work there, being at the research where the research is happening at MIT, following the open source technology, having investors like Richard Soja, who's one of the highest in H index researchers out there, and just being really just steeped in the Gen AI or the AI machine learning culture in Silicon Valley and in San Francisco, that this was happening. I think if you weren't as embedded in steeped in this kind of community of machine learning researchers, maybe it was a bit more of a surprise. But I think for the people who are actually building the technology and doing the research, I think it was pretty clear. And so that for me, I think San Francisco is a city that lives in the future, right? Just this weekend, I was seeing literally flying cars, over the San Francisco Bay Area. I mean, those vertical takeoff machines where somebody can, fly off and fly around. I mean, there are more probably self-driving cars and ride shares right now in San Francisco. So it is a city that lives in the future, and that applies to things like flying cars and self-driving cars as it applies to state-of-the-art AI.
Yeah. Well, I think Elon Musk tonight is actually announcing a breakthrough, apparently, I think, for Tesla in terms of self-driving cars. It's been teased out as an announcement tonight, so I don't know what the announcement is yet.
You heard it here, folks. You heard it here, folks. October 10th. Yeah, we'll see how. I mean, I've no doubt of Elon's ability to execute.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, isn't it, really? So that's the reality. And that's the thing about any good business. It's like your overnight success, but you maybe saw the vision or the future, and basically it's taken maybe 5 years or 4 years or 10 years. So sometimes it's just being around long enough to actually win the game, isn't it? Rather than just, and also having enough money in the bank sometimes to win the game.
Yeah, I mean, I think we live, what is the capital markets but a jungle, and you got to survive in order to thrive, and in order to have a chance to thrive. And sometimes it's feast or famine. But if it's famine, then you still gotta be one of those that like a tardigrade. They just don't die in any environment. You could put a tardigrade in space, and it will somehow like just survive, and then you can bring it back to Earth, and it'll come back to life. And I think as an entrepreneur, you got to be like a tardigrade. Like just I love the tardigrade, and this is an animal I learned like in college, and whenever it kind of really does seep into how I think of startups. But like a tardigrade literally like takes the DNA of all the tardigrades and incorporates them into its own DNA. It survives in any kind of extreme environment, and I think there is an element where a founder does need to be like that, just able to withstand any kind of environment, and both feast, because you can die in feast as well. You can raise a lot of money, waste a lot of money, hire the wrong people, not mismanage your resources. So there are many ways for a startup to die, both in feast and in famine.
Yeah. Yeah. So what was you saying, that there was a beast that actually we need to, what was the name of it you were calling it?
I believe it's called a tardigrade.
How's that spelt? I don't.
Yeah. So it's TARDYGRAVE, I think is how you spell it. Maybe you can probably search it on Google and find some approximate. I mean, I might be wrong, a couple letters here and there, but it is my my spirit animal, maybe you can say.
So is that not a mythical? Is that a real creature?
No, that is like a real creature. That is a real creature that exists. It looks like a weird like worm.
Right. Okay. And it exists in space. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it exists like in the bottom of the ocean. It can exist like you can put it out, and it like dehydrates and somehow survives in space. It's like really hard to kill, and it's a very it's an animal with a lot of grit.
Okay, right, fantastic. All right, just to maybe sum a few things up. Number one, what have you learned as an entrepreneur, and basically right from the start, including your QuickHelp and then onto Omnikey? What are some of the key learnings that you have learned along the way as a digital entrepreneur and doing startups? What's important?
Yeah, right. I think what I've learned recently is how to effectively manage. I do think that and how to effectively hire, and how to effectively lead a high performance team.
Yeah.
And I think this is so important for a startup, because as you said, it's all about execution, right? It's not about the idea. Everyone has ideas, and everyone has good ideas, but very few people can execute against them well. And the ability to execute against an idea and win, in an idea, in terms of the opportunity of that idea, is all about execution, and execution is done by teams. And so, how to manage, how to not to, like, for example, right? Like there's this thing related to founder mode, right? And it's a big theme of like, an entrepreneur, should micromanage and should be really in everyone's grill and really putting the pressure on. And I believe that, and I do operate like that to maybe, for most of my time as an entrepreneur, I have been operating that, and that is my instinct. But at the same time, you also have to hold your managers accountable, and you have to hold your people accountable and set clear expectations and set clear accountability. And if someone is not performing in their role, you have to also be willing to switch them out and and make tough decisions like this. And I actually think it's harder to fire people than to hire people. Yes. I think firing well is like the understated skill of then everyone loves hiring, right? Everyone's happy, it's like having a baby. It's like there's anything that's possible. But then firing is, I made a mistake, there's a mistake. Yeah. Not easy to admit that. And so managing people properly, hiring people well, knowing when you need to make that switch, so that you continue executing and delivering against your goals, running a high performance organization by having clear accountability, but also keeping, but also holding people accountable, also, really like being very involved, but not being involved in a way that is not, which doesn't cause additional confusion or create feelings of disempowerment, where everyone feels empowered, and that and that it actually, your involvement doesn't create confusion, so it creates more clarity, is what's really important. And these are very nuanced skills. as part of being a CEO and especially in a growing, in a growth space. And so that is a skill that I've learned more recently through my, process of being an entrepreneur. I think, many people can have an idea, many people can build a prototype, and many people can get a handful of users, but then and maybe even get to $1 million or a couple million in revenue, but then to create an organization, to create a company, that is something that is a different kind of skill as well, and a skill that I think I've like just through blood, sweat, and tears really learned.
Right. That's some great insights. I like the insight about, in other words, you need to fire well as well. I think that's actually very important. So
yeah, I think it's harder. That is a harder skill.
Harder. I agree with you.
Yeah. And also at the same time, again, if you're micromanaging somebody, you're not doing your job, right? Like you need to be at the helm, doing your job exceptionally well. You can't be doing, 3 other people's job at the same time that no one's, steering the ship. So like you have to trust people, you have to empower people, you have to let people do their job. If they're not delivering, that has to be made clear, and then you have to make the tough decisions regarding that. But you also have to be supportive, because it's not always their fault that they're not succeeding, right? It could be it's there's a lot that happens at a startup, and it happens in a global competitive market. And so if someone's not executing, it doesn't mean it's necessarily their fault, but you do need to quickly figure out why something isn't working, and figure out and quickly kind of solve it and move on to that next problem. And so that is, and to do that with empathy, and to do that with sympathy, and do that with emotional intelligence, is where people feel excited to come to work every day. It's not, it's a skill. It's a very important skill.
Yep. Okay, so one last question before I ask you the last question, and that last question is, what brings you joy? In other words, if you had all the money in the world, what would you do every day without getting paid? And that's the last question. But before you answer that, I'm curious about, okay, you've got the technology, you launch it. How do you generate leads and sales? What was your strategy there? And do you eat your own dog food along the way? In other words, use your own technology to generate leads. Tell us about how you actually built the business. I'm curious about that.
Yeah, so we've always been eating our own dog food. We've always been using our own tool, and that was also another reason why we started in ads, for many reasons, because there's the most data, because I believe that data and distribution is the edge in generative AI. That's where most of the data and distribution is, and that we could dog food the product. And so our go-to-market motion is we generate leads through ads, through targeted ads. We use our own tool for creating and orchestrating our omni-channel advertisements.
Yep. Okay.
As our product gets better, we become more efficient at getting good quality leads, and that has a virtuous cycle of improving our growth and our product.
Yep.
But the very day one, when it was a lot of interns. Like I think we really harnessed a lot of interns cold calling leads.
Okay.
And that
good old fashioned way.
The good old fashioned way, yeah, right. Just
cold calling.
Yeah, I think that's cold emailing, cold calling. Especially during COVID, there was a lot of students that were looking for work, an internship, while they were kind of studying remotely. And so that there was a huge pool of young, energetic people who had time on their hands that were hungry to learn. And so I was very lucky to be able to utilize that, and utilize that to kind of propel Omnikey's growth during that period.
Right. Cool. That's fantastic. Okay. The last question to wrap it up. What if you had all the money in the world, what would you do every day that would bring you joy, or does bring you joy today?
Well, I think just doing what I'm doing at a larger scale, I genuinely am a person that lives to work. I love my job. I don't, it's truly so fun, to be able to spend every day with technologists, imagining and scheming the future, and building the future, with people that you've that you enjoy working with, and so that, yeah, and a technology and a mission they're passionate about. I think that is like what I'm doing today is what I would love to be doing forever until
Okay.
the day that I'm dead. I would love to be doing this, hopefully at a much larger scale. Um, but yeah, I mean, you know, if I had everything, if I had all the money in the world, I'd just be doing the same thing. Because this is really, hopefully, now that's pressure for me though, because in order to do that, I need to continue to level myself up
Mm.
to be the best person to be running this company.
Yep.
So I do need to continue to, like level up my skills and my abilities, to be able to, do that at a larger scale. That's
Yep.
on me. But yeah, I mean, if I had, if I could do anything, I'd be doing this.
Right. That's awesome. In other words, you're on purpose and you're following your bliss, as Joseph Campbell said, which is
Yeah,
the author of Hero's Journey. So thank you very much, Hikari, for actually sharing your story. It's inspiring, and I look forward to seeing Omnikey, and look forward to catching up maybe in the future to talk more about AI and creativity, because that's fascinating, and I have a certain take on it, and just wrote an article on it actually on my blog. AI, is it basically creative genius, or is it just a ghost in the machine? So anyway, we'll talk about creativity in AI, I think, next time we catch up.
I'm really looking forward to. I'll read that article, and yeah, it's a really interesting topic.
It is a very interesting topic. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
fascinated by it because as humans, we thought that we were, what made us human was creativity.
yeah,
But the reality is that AI is actually asking big questions about humans. In other words, the machine is asking questions of us as humans. What does it mean to be human? If the machine can do most of the stuff we used to do, such as writing and creating art. There's an answer in there, but we'll talk about that another time.
I was reading kind of some of the notes of questions you ask, and one of the questions you ask, or you was in the notes, was like book suggestions, and I really like this book called like 𝓬𝓫𝓪𝓽, and it talks about like several millennia into the future of humanity, and it's about the story of this, essentially it's like this virtualized human that like spans several, because they keep coming back to life as like a virtualized person in every like millennia essentially, and the things they have to deal with at every situation, and also the funny thing is like the precursor of every chapter is the total amount of compute in terms of both human brain power and AI brain power that exists in that universe.
Yep.
And I think it is, it's this kind of symbiotic thing, right? Both human brain power and AI brain power kind of computationally having a certain, MIPS, million instructions per second, like like evolving together to solve bigger problems, bigger challenges, overcoming bigger challenges, building Dyson spheres around the sun. Yeah, I would view it as a competitive thing with AI. I would
Yep.
view it as like a symbiotic thing, as humanity, improving our collective intelligence. So,
I
um, yeah,
I totally agree. I think it's basically an amplifier of our creativity.
absolutely, I agree
Uh,
with that.
yeah.
Yeah,
So I've just uh, it it's something that continues to fascinate me in terms of a lot of people see it as a threat. I just see it as an amplifier of myself and my ideas. But what I love about AI, it actually breaks up the patterned and fixed thinking we quite often have out of our own experiences. That is hard to break out of those molds. I think AI actually challenges that by recombining human global intelligence in a spot where we actually can help us break our own bounds. So I totally agree with you. I think it's a hybrid model. It's symbiotic, and it's very exciting. So I've just read another book too called The Creativity Code
yeah,
by which is awesome as well. So look, I think we need to have another conversation soon about
absolutely.
AI and creativity, because it's, for me, I'm absolutely curious about the intersection of AI and humans, because I think it can help us make us more human, but there's a lot of elements in the mix. And so next conversation, Hikari.
Thank you, Jeff. Really, it was a pleasure talking with you, and looking forward to our next conversation.
Awesome, mate. Well, I'm looking forward to Omnikey. I'll check out a little bit closer, and we need to look. We're launching a new product, so we might go and do a trial and might try you out. So,
Sounds good. If you feel free to try, sign up on our website. It's a free trial, and
yeah,
yeah, we'd love to. Yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
All
All
right.
right.
Well, thank you very much, Hikari. It's been an absolute pleasure. We'll catch up soon about AI and human creativity.
Sounds good. Thank you, Jeff.
Okay, thank you.